And we are live. So another another guest with us today, Shawn Warner. Now, you would have known him from 2 weeks ago. Last week he was supposed to appear, but it fell through. Today, Shawn, who is a serial killer expert, is going to be talking about the New York Ripper, Jewel. Now, I have very little knowledge in this subject, and then we're going to be speaking about victimology. So those two subjects, and obviously we can talk about everything in between. But before you watch the live stream, if you're watching this after the fact, remember, guys, smash that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share. Sharing is caring. Just share, copy, link the clipboard, make a little social media post, send to a friend on Facebook or WhatsApp Messenger, or just put it in social media. Leave a comment in the comment section after this because that helps me out in the algorithm, and smashing those like buttons really helps me out in the algorithm too. I'm going to bring Shawn on now in just a second. But as I say, Shawn is a serial killer expert. This guy has a wealth of knowledge of everything, but serial killers would be his forte. So we're going to be doing a whole series every Thursday or so, give or take a couple of days. We're going to be doing talking about all the serial killers, and this is probably going to be years in the making because there's so many different subjects, so many subcategories. So if there's any questions, if there's anything you would like us to speak about, leave it in the comment section. We can talk about that for future subjects. And during the live stream, you can ask questions live too. Questions are welcome. So let's bring Shawn on now, and let's get into what we are going to talk about. Jewel, the New York Ripper.
Hey.
Shawn Warner. Shawn, how are you keeping, sir?
All right. How are you?
I am fantastic. Jewel, the New York Ripper. Now,
yes.
Melissa O'Neill, see this lady here, right? This lady here. We let her down last week, Shawn, because she was looking forward to our Thursday live stream talking about this. She enjoyed the first one, and she was looking forward to last Thursday. And we missed it. We couldn't do it. We got sick. I got sick.
Yeah. I'm glad you're feeling better,
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, that happens, I was at the beginning of the summer, I had tickets to go see Vil Vallo, the singer from Him, one of my all-time favorite bands. The night of the show, I got so sick I could not go. It was soul crushing, because Him is no longer together. So I've had the tickets for like a year, so I know what it's like to, when you're looking forward to something and,
No, I get that. I get that. Listen to the amount of times I've been in a situation I wanted to do it. Next minute, I've came down with an illness. I've came down with a sickness, and it's just wrecked me. And even once you get better, you think to yourself, I wish I had have been able to go to that.
Yeah.
So listen, I have to confess something to you, Shawn. I wasn't able to do a lot of research on the Ripper,
Joel Rifkin.
Joel Rifkin. So
he's not up there with your Bundys, your Dahmers. You have to dig a little bit deeper to find some good information on him. He's still alive. He's doing a life sentence. He's from the same exact area that Rex Heuermann's from. That's why I thought it would be an interesting sort of compare and contrast.
I did hear there was a link between them two, possibly.
They're saying that some of the bodies that they found could be old, because none of the bodies they found were anything but basically skeletal remains. So they could very well have been some of Rifkin's old victims, but he has been very forthcoming with the police, and he's very open about talking about his crimes, and he's super intelligent. So he knows that, one more body isn't going to get him a death sentence. There is no death penalty, basically anywhere anymore. So, in New York, especially, it's known that there's no death penalty. So that's why if he had other victims out there, I think he would have come forward. But the one victim that does kind of resemble some of Rifkin's work, he was he would chop. He was a dismemberer. You know what I mean? He would take bodies and just uh, scatter parts. So um, it was tough to say, all right, well, this guy's working in this area. A head was actually found on a golf course of one of Rifkin's victims.
Wow.
But there's one of the bodies that is being at least, I don't know if it's being attributed officially to Rex Heuermann, but it's certain the remains of this woman. She was, chopped in half. So they found
Mhm.
her legs in a part of New York called Fire Island, and the rest of her, I believe, they found on Jones Beach or somewhere close to Gilgo. And I
So,
think,
I mean, it's really fascinating to hear this. And before we actually get into who Joel is himself, there was a congregation of these sort of like serial killers living amongst each other.
I mean, New York has had its share. You go back to David Berkowitz. Uh, he was the son of Sam, probably one of or the 44 caliber killer, as he was first called. But I'd have to say, I mean, he was not the most prolific, but he was definitely one of the most feared. I mean, he kept New York basically on high alert as far as long haired brunettes. I mean, women were getting their hair cut, dyeing it blonde. I mean, they were definitely afraid of David, and he's somebody that I've had personal correspondence with for a few years.
You spoke to the son of Sam.
But yeah, regularly. I mean, he's not like a weekly writer. I get um, a letter, probably like 3 or 4 letters a year from him.
Wow.
But during his incarceration, which has been since the 70s, he's only written 13 people. So I feel kind of
Those
yeah,
letters are going to be worth a pretty penny, my friend, whenever, whenever the time comes that he's not with us anymore. And even just as it is for historical purposes,
yeah.
those, but I mean, maybe if you were ever comfortable with in the future, you could come on and read some
Oh
of these
yeah,
letters.
yeah, yeah.
That would be
I wouldn't
fantastic.
have.
I would love to do that.
He he doesn't talk about his crimes or anything like that in any of his letters. He's um pretty hardcore Christian. He but he doesn't preach in his letters either. We talk about Pink Floyd and like music. We talk about books. We talk about he's a pretty um good guy to like bounce things off of. I know that sounds crazy, but um
So on the human level, one to one, if you're having a conversation with him, he's okay. But you can never take away the fact that this guy gunned down so many people. And actually, do you know what? See next week, right? If Sean wants, we can just do one on the son of Sam
yeah,
next Thursday. That's the next topic. And I want to stick on Joel here
okay.
because we could just talk about the son of Sam because it's so interesting. But
Yeah.
explain
Yeah,
to
any
me,
one of these
ex-
guys we could do a whole show on,
yeah,
but I'm just
yeah,
saying, I was speaking of New York
yeah,
serial killers, and there were
yeah.
quite a few. Richard
Hmm.
Cottingham was called the Times Square Ripper. And this guy was brutal. I mean, he would dismember and then set them on fire.
Whoa,
So,
that's mate. That's I don't mean to laugh at that, but that's how I react to things like that. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
I mean,
There's a cutoff point where you do something to somebody and then you just stop doing things. These
right,
people just
overkill is it,
overkill. Like,
yeah, I mean, you've already cut off their heads, disemboweled them, and then you're going to set them on fire. I mean, I get you want to get rid of forensic evidence and things of that nature, but that's brutal.
yeah, 100%.
That's
Mate,
and to me, I've never had any correspondence with Mr. Cottingham, but he was. It's funny because a couple of these guys, uh, it seems like there's a New York trait where these the serial killers that are known, like Richard Cottingham and now Rex Heuermann. Richard Cottingham was now this is back in the 70s and 80s. Computers are just now coming into like the public. People are starting to get home computers and things, like, because normally, like, a computer that just to play chess would take up a whole building. So he's a computer programmer working in Manhattan, and just like Rex Heuermann was an architect. Joel Rifkin was a photography student, and he ended up, taking some photos for the local newspapers. He covered a lot of sporting events, boxing, and things of that nature. But while he was in college, one of his best friends ends up becoming a New York City police officer. So these guys aren't like the scum of the earth. They're like guys that could have been, uh, you know, they had these double lives. Not so much Joel Rifkin. I mean, he lived with his parents. He, he was a fan of other serial killers. When they raided his house, I mean, he not only had all the clippings of his crimes, but books on Bundy and John Wayne Gacy, and everybody from what's called the golden age of serial killers. When Richard Ramirez, the Hillside Stranglers, these guys were just holding court and kicking butt and taking names. They were.
Could he have been influenced then to, if just for instance he hadn't have read those books or seen that, or his life had have been a different way,
Mhm.
do you think then he would have been a killer, or was it always in him to
I
be a
think
killer?
I think it was always in him. I think, you know, uh, like we talked about before, psychopathy does not mean that you're going to be a killer or a serial killer or any kind of killer. But a psychopath has the ability to disconnect from those feelings of, this other person is a human just like me, and I'm going to hurt this person, and not only that, I'm going to hurt their family, and they don't comprehend the ripple effect of killing this one person. But to touch a little bit on the topic we're going to talk about next, which is victimology, the people that they choose are what a lot of profilers and police and people in the field call the less dead, meaning that they're not likely to be missed. They're not likely to, there's not going to be a huge outpouring of emotion to find the person who killed these people. And that's why they focus on the victims that they focus on, like whether it's sex workers or whether it's children, it's usually someone that they have ready access to. And I'm not putting children in the same category as, prostitutes, but I'm saying, you're not going to see a full grown man walking down the street and just come up and grab him and pull him into a van, because there's going to be some pushback. You want to have the most successful chance of forcing your will on this other person as possible, because that's what it's all about, control. And that's why
Hmm.
Joel Rifkin focused solely on sex workers. That's why, you know, he would go to the one section of town where he knew these girls. He was friends with a lot of them. Some of them he would do business with and not kill. Some of them he actually considered friends, but at the same time,
Strange. That's sorry to put in. It's strange how somebody can differentiate. It's
yeah,
like he chose a profession. He chose the women and their profession, but then he had a friendship with them, with some of them, but then killed others. It's like
yeah,
that is literally the mind of a sociopath. If you
yeah.
think about that, it is a pure sociopath.
And it's kind of not the same thing, but similar to like BTK and his cubing, where he could compartmentalize things. Now, Joel, like I said, some of these women he considered friends, and he would see 4 or 5, some 10 times. But if the mood struck him, he would kill them too. I mean, it wasn't like because you were his friend, you were safe. It's like being friends with a lion. If he's hungry enough, he doesn't care if he's eating a friend or an enemy. And that's what it's like with um a guy like that. He has the ability to feel friendship and the ability to understand that this is a person I enjoy being around and I enjoy their company. And if they're gone, that that's somebody I'm not going to have in my life anymore, and I'll miss them. But that just isn't enough to say I'm not going to kill them, because that was what drove him. It wasn't the
Predatory instincts.
yeah, it was he was definitely had the instincts of a predator. And he was a smart guy. He had I believe a 130 IQ
Wow,
thereabouts.
wow.
And so he when he the way that he got caught was sort of like a comedy of errors. He had a body that he was getting rid of in the back of his little pickup truck, and his license the license plate had fallen off. And so the police were going to stop him and say, hey, did you know your license plate is missing? So when they got behind him, he took off, lost control, ran the car into a street sign. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was right in front of a courthouse or the police precinct. And so when they pulled him over, they, obviously smelled the putrefaction in the back of the car, the decaying corpse that he had wrapped up back there. And so they said, what's back here? Plus he was inebriated. Just he had been getting away with it for so long. And this is what happens to a lot of serial killers who start to get sloppy because they've gotten away with 5, 10 murders. They think that, well, I don't have to take as many precautions because I got this. This is something that I do that nobody else does. I'm the best at this.
Narcissism, sort of like,
Very narcissistic.
yeah,
You know what
yeah,
I
like
mean?
grandiose narcissism. Look at me, I am the best at this, and we all
Yes.
try to outdo each other, sort of.
Yeah, there is some of that. There is some of that. Bundy thought that he could help uh, catch the Green River Killer. He thought he could sort of head up this task force and help catch Gary Ridgway, and because he had some special insight into it, because you know I guess there's a killer consciousness, but he didn't offer anything helpful to catch Ridgway. I mean, Ridgway did get caught, but again, it was, Ridgway had to be the sloppiest serial killer of them all.
Hmm.
And ironically, also one of the most prolific. I mean, he dumped bodies in the same area so often that one day they found 7 bodies, you know, and that happened. Only time that happened was on Gilgo Beach when they found 11 bodies, but they only attributed 4 of them to one man, Rex Heuermann. So, you know, and
We'll have to do a live stream on the connection between all of these, but just to stick a jewel here and the
mhm,
victimology side of things. So the Ripper himself, Joel the Ripper,
mhm.
what was his span of serial killing from what date till from it started till it ended?
He was active in the 80s, um, late 80s, mid to late 80s. He wasn't on the scene for like 10 years. He was, um, you know what? I think when he got caught, it was actually the early 90s. It was the early 90s.
So it was the era of, it was like the end of the serial killer, the end of the serial killer era, sort of. That was the end of the
It
peak
it
of
was
serial
winding
killers.
down. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
winding down. I always think that um it kind of ended when they caught BTK. I
Hmm.
think that or the Golden State Killer.
Hmm.
When they, of course, he wasn't active when they caught him. He was, I think 86 years old when they caught him, but um, that kind of signaled that these kind of crimes aren't going to be as commonplace as they were. And that's because the minute we wake up and leave our house, we're on camera at least, 100 to 200 times. When you go to put gasoline in your car, when you go to get money out of your ATM, or when you are walking down the street, you're on somebody's camera, whether it's
So
you know
surveillance, the surveillance state,
Google Earth. Yeah,
yeah,
the
yeah.
surveillance aspect of it is huge.
Hmm.
And you know um people being more aware, that something like this can happen. It's not just um always going to be the next guy. Someday, if you let your guard down and you put yourself in a high risk situation, as anyone who listened to our previous shows will know that I certainly lived a high risk lifestyle, and I could have been killed any day. But um,
Actually,
yeah,
meeting a serial, like for instance, just in your story, but Meet a you meeting a serial killer back in your heyday probably wasn't one of the worst things could have happened to you, because you were around such evil anyway. There was such
Mhm.
negative evil in all forms, that manifested in all forms, that actually a serial killer probably, what you probably walked by many as a serial killer.
Well,
In
I
one
mean,
instance, you actually knew a serial killer
yeah,
in Tiny, but
tiny.
see Joel, though, his first victim, there were prostitutes. All of them were working guards, right?
Mhm.
So I
His first victim, actually, he took back to his house because his parents were on vacation, and he brings her back. It was sort of the intention of killing her, but mainly for some, you know, adult entertainment or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what we can and can't say nowadays. Essay or
it's YouTube, mate.
or
It changes every 3 minutes, so
I
I couldn't
know,
tell you. I don't know.
right? So I'm just gonna say he took her back to his house to finish the transaction,
Yeah, very good
and
way of putting it.
and you know, in the back of his mind, he knew he wanted to kill somebody. So he, they do what they had intended to do. And he had provided some, I believe it was crack cocaine for her. And so when that ran out, she wanted more. And Joel said, "You know what? No, I'm not going to go get this so and so more drugs. I'm going to kill her." So he takes this uh I forgot the exact caliber of the shell, but it was a military machine gun shell, like a howitzer or something like that, a huge shell, like over a foot long, and he takes it and bashes her head in with it. But he hits her a couple of good times, and because she's kind of yanked up on narcotics, that she doesn't go down right away. So he has to put in some work to get his first kill, and
That's nasty. That is nasty. That isn't it. Like
yeah.
you just imagine being in that situation, that poor woman. And do you know what? One thing that stands out there. Sorry for interrupting you, Sean. Just to
No, that's
react,
fine. That's fine.
just to react to that, is that it seems like his mindset was, I'm taking this lady in. There's going to be a transaction, but hold on, you're not going anywhere. You're not getting the cocaine. I've give you enough. You're dead
Right.
now. So he's
Yeah.
testing the boundaries of who he actually is on his first kill.
Yes. And I think that her attitude kind of played into it, because everything I've read and watched, um, you know, she was the type of person who was very aggressive, probably used to bossing her clients around and getting her way. But, you know,
Bit of a dominatrix.
mm, it was just maybe just a domineering type personality. I mean, you think about a lot of these girls that don't operate with pimps. They kind of are like freelancers, and they're out there on their own, so they're not these sort of wilting flowers. They're, once they can handle themselves. I've never done any transactions with any, but I've known plenty of sex workers, or whatever you want to call them, from my days of using drugs. But um, I never knew any that was out on the street and considered themselves a victim or a potential victim. They always seem to be like, I can handle any situation that comes along. And come on. that's just not the case. A lot
Yeah,
of them
of
are like
course, yeah.
100 pounds soaking wet because they're emaciated from heroin, cocaine use. So
But they're hardened, though. I get what you're
they are
saying. Like,
hardened.
for
They
instance, like
are, yeah,
they would know how to use violence if needed. If, for
sure,
instance, if they were put into a situation, there's more likely one of those girls getting out of that bad situation than a normal
yes,
girl living just a normal life. They're hard.
absolutely,
They're weather beaten. They know what they're doing. They're
right,
basically that's hence why it's called the game. They're on the
right.
game because it is
Well,
it is a game. It's it has its ups and downs, but it's interesting to hear about Joel. His transformation. He's got that first kill. He's testing the boundaries and who he is.
mhm.
Is there big periods before his kills, or is it quite sporadic? Just you
It's
know,
no, he did- he was a pretty once he got started, he was, he wouldn't go for months, let's say, with it was more like weeks and sometimes days, you
wow,
know,
wow,
because I once he got started, he's, he found other way, like to dispose of the bodies, let's say. Well, he started to dismember them, and then get rid of body parts here and there instead of a whole body and just dump it here. He thought, with, forensics, what they were at the time, and, you didn't have the investigative genetic genealogy. You didn't have a lot of the forensic tools that, investigators and detectives have in their toolboxes nowadays. So, catching Joel basically with his hand in the cookie jar, having that body in his truck, and like he said, you know, a 49-cent bolt got him caught, because he knew that license plate was either barely hanging on or was off the truck. So he knew that. He knew that, but he thought, I'm going to get out here, or I'm going to dump this body. I'm going to, go home and have a shower, have a bath, and, watch the Mets game. But it didn't end up happening that way because, he didn't keep that um, high attention to detail, and he didn't, a lot of times the way these killers get caught is it's their own fault.
complacency. They get complacent, don't they?
Yeah, you get complacent, or even worse than that, you get rushed, like, because you've gotten away with it so many times, and that could be 2 or 3 times when you're talking about murder. So the fourth one feels like, of course I'm going to get away with it, of course. And when I hate to keep referring back to Bundy, but I think Bundy is the archetypal serial killer. To me, I just think that that case has everything in it.
Hmm.
It's um,
What about Joel's mom? Was his so he picked a specific type of woman, working guard or not. He maybe went for a specific type of woman. Was he abused by his
no,
mom and his dad? Did he have a good upbringing?
no,
Did he have a bad
yeah,
upbringing?
yeah. He had a good, good family. They um, lived in a neighborhood that would be at least middle class, if not upper middle class. He cut his neighbor's lawn. He was not like, well, we better watch out for Joel. He's crazy. He's going to kill somebody one day. Nobody thought that. He was a college student. Like I said, he was taking photography courses, became really quite a good photographer. Um, there was, like I said, I believe we talked about last time. I mentioned outliers, like killers that don't um, fit into that um, the the profile
Yeah,
so
the
easily.
profile. Yeah, I was going to say that because we talked about that last week a bit, and there's your sort of bog standard sort of upbringing of a serial killer on the spectrum, either highly intelligent, low intelligent,
Hmm.
no empathy or low empathy, start killing animals,
Yeah,
the
starting fires, bedwetting, all that
bedwetting.
stuff.
The mothers maybe always having men in, so they have resentment to women. They grow up and then they start, they just take their frustration at women. Next minute they've got
Hmm.
like 20 victims. But with this guy, he's got a good upbringing. His mum's not a working girl. There's not
No.
tons of men coming into the house. He's your sort of middle class guy who's everybody likes. He's a part of society. So then on that basis alone, did this guy want to kill out of just pure spoiledness? I can take this life because it's lower than me, and actually I'm going to go for and I don't think they're the lowest of society. This isn't me saying this. This is how
Right.
society deems working girls, but I'm going to go for what society deems the lower class, the lowest people on planet, working girls, and I'm going to take them out because nobody cares about them.
Well, the thing about Joel Rifkin is, you know, you have to put him in the category of a sexual sadist,
Right.
because killing the girl is part of the whole thing, but it isn't every time with him, so it's so hard to say, oh, he's a sexually sadistic psychopath. He, was abused. He had head trauma. Those things, they just don't play with Joel, because
Mm-hmm.
he he was a different kind of uh, serial killer, and I think that's why you know there wasn't the sort of hatred poured on him like there was with Jeffrey Dahmer and some of the other guys, that Bundy, Gacy, because the victimology, like I said, Bundy killed women who were going to have successful lives. They were all um,
Do you think
on
that
the
comes with narcissism, though, Sean? Like, for instance, like you have these serial killers that go for working girls, and then you have Bundy who goes for women that are sort of moving up in their life. And I'm not saying working girls can't do that, but
uh,
generally speaking, so like he's going, well, I'm going to go for the golden ticket because this is who I am. I'm not going to work with these other guys, these other serial killers. I'm this guy. I'm top dog, and I'm always going to be top dog. So I'm going to go for these girls.
no, I think that, see, the thing with Bundy is, he if you look at his victims, they all bear a striking resemblance to his first love, and
Mm-hmm.
she kind of kicked him to the curb. Not to use street lingo or whatever, but he's in love with this woman, and they have a relationship, but she starts to feel he's not motivated enough. So she breaks up with him,
Mm-hmm.
ends the relationship, and that motivates Bundy. He goes, gets back in law school, becomes a part of the uh, young Republicans, and he actually starts working for a candidate. Gets involved in the Mormon Church. Go figure. And
I know you don't like the Mormons, Sean. If any, listen, me and Sean speak behind the scenes, and we're gonna be. He wants to come on and do one just about the Mormons alone. But you know what, right? I have to say this without butting in, because we could speak about Bundy all day. Just to stay on Joel, it seems
yeah,
like Joel's the opposite of Bundy. It's like he's
yes,
he's the complete opposite, chalk and cheese. So so
he's almost like the opposite of every. A lot of people talk about how BTK was like the definitive outlier, but I don't. I think Joel Rifkin was, because you know he just like a this specter just came out of the blue. Just like like seriously calling him the Ripper was so fitting, because like his namesake, there was a good possibility that he would have never have been caught hadn't that light if that license plate didn't fall off, you know.
well, it just makes you think how many others are out there we will never know of, because maybe they're too cunning to get caught. And
Oh yeah,
and
there's speculation that I've heard that at any given time there's 200 serial killers working in America. You know,
wow,
I
mate,
find that I find
that
that a little at this day and age, I find that hard to believe. I think it's a lot lower than that. I think maybe 50,
Well,
you
define a
know.
serial killer. You could have a guy like, take Chicago, for instance, the gun crime. You could have a guy who just likes killing people. He doesn't even have a like a,
Well,
a he just run around shooting people. Just, he's in a
that's
different gang. I just
that's
want
a
to shoot him.
spree killer, though.
Spree
A
killer. Yeah,
spree,
yeah.
yeah. A spree killer is like Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, or a school shooter, or somebody that
Yeah, yeah.
goes into their their work. Like for some reason, back in the 80s and 90s, postal workers were going crazy at an alarming rate, and uh, you know, Berkowitz was actually a postman. So, um,
It's mad. Like, that's absolutely crazy. And
yeah,
see with Joel, you mentioned something there. So his whole thing was he was a sexual sadist. So he got his kicks. It wasn't like some serial killers where they were a little bit weird. They would have maybe they would have sex, but then the killing wasn't a sexual act. But with him, with Joel, it was solely to get his kicks. He got pleasure out of seeing those women in pain or killing them or whatnot. That's where he got his kicks from.
yeah. But at the same time, it seemed like with Rifkin, it seemed like it was almost like his finishing move. Like, not to
Man,
say,
that is messed up. Like that. I mean, to think about that, like you've got this working girl. Every man knows this. I have to explain it like this, right? Every man knows this, right? So you're in bed with a woman, you're having sex with a woman. It ends at that moment. A man is at his weakest. A woman could say, "Give me $1,000, give me a thousand
right,
pounds," and you would hand it to her because you've just had that release, right? Because
right.
that's women are the most powerful force on earth, because they have that ability over a man. Now, I've never once thought to myself after that act, "Oh, I'm going to kill that person," because
No, of course not.
if anything, it's pure
Of
love. You're
course
like,
not.
you'll do anything. Do you want a cup of tea, sweetheart? Do you want me to make you a cigarette? Do you want a joint?
Right.
Do you want me to go down and make you a fucking fry up? Anything you want, I will give to you, because you're so beautiful to me right now. But
Right.
to actually kill a
But
woman
see, you're
I can't
talking
fathom.
about the difference between love and lust. You know what I mean? You're
Yeah, yeah,
talking
yeah.
about the difference between um, the love of your life and the love of right now, this minute, because
Yeah.
you had an extra $50,
Yeah,
Eh,
I'm just built differently. I just, like, for me personally, I'm like the opposite of a serial killer, because I'm thinking to myself, like, even any woman, it's not just, well, obviously specifically towards my missus that have been with for
right,
a long,
right.
but with any woman, it's just like, it's like any woman that I've ever been with, I've never said to myself afterwards, "Well, actually, right, you're done now. I'm going to kill you."
Yeah, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, that's it.
Uh,
You're done now.
I that's the thing about the rarity of serial killers. People think because the term was introduced into the pop culture or zeitgeist, or the public domain, that it gets overused. And certainly when there's a new serial killer movie every time you turn on the television, every time you go to the cinema, there's a new serial killer movie. And it starts to, just like anything else, it starts to become commonplace. It starts to become, uh, you know what, this guy's a serial killer. Well, so what? There's been a lot of serial killers. What's next? And it
Hmm.
starts to become like that. And there was a time, when these guys, like, especially like Richard Ramirez, kind of embodied this, but they were thought of as like rock stars. There were so many women visiting Richard Ramirez that they had to turn them away. And it's just not like that anymore. It's a different time in the world, and killers are not thought of as rock stars or um you know
But it is
matinee
it is it is a
idols.
thing. It is a thing with with, I know we don't want to get into politics here, but I've been sort of researching the extreme left, and
Hmm.
they sort of immortalize serial killers because they are the epitome of anarchy, and that's what technically the extreme left are, is just are anarchists, and they they like them because not of because of their killing, but they like them because of their inability to fit into society. And I think that's what it
Yeah,
is. These serial killers like Joel Bundy, BTK, these people never fitted into society, but they found a way to make society fit around them, and
but
that an interesting theory.
uh, that doesn't apply to all of them, though, because BTK, John Wayne Gacy, like we were talking about, Rex Uerman,
Hmm.
Richard Cottingham, these guys did fit into society.
Some of them,
But
yeah,
they
they did,
but
yeah.
they had a double life. You know what I
But
mean?
that's what I
I
mean
mean,
by that. Was that them fitting into society, or them making society fit around them?
it was their facade, their
Yeah.
disguise. They needed to do
Yes.
that. They
Yes.
needed to be a good dad, a good husband. They needed to provide a house in the suburbs and a car, and they needed to not abuse their wives. They needed to keep that sense of normalcy that let them slip into the darkness of the night to do what they do, and then come back in the light of day and say,
Hmm.
"It's just me. It's just
Wow.
Joel. It's
That's
just,
mad. Like, that's
well, I
absolutely
cut your
crazy.
grass." So
That's mad to think that a guy would be out in the middle of the night, picking up working girls, murdering them, dismembering them, scattering their body all over the city, and then
mhm.
in the morning time, he's just Joel who's going to cut your grass,
Yeah, it's
and
just Joel. You
just
know,
Joel. Like, but and here, so how many victims did Joel have altogether then?
I believe. I don't want to misquote this, so let me look at this. I think it was in the teens, but
You think it's a lot higher, don't you?
no, no,
Oh, you
it's in
don't know?
it's in the teens. Um, if it's a little higher, uh, it might 17. Yeah, I knew it was in the
That
teens.
is a high body count. Like, think
Yeah,
about that, one to do that to one person, you're destroyed. Like, if somebody accidentally kills somebody in a car accident, you're destroyed. But to do that 17 times and have a sexual sadist motive to do that is, I mean, that is the epitome of the devil, wouldn't you think?
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't do it, but you know, um, I look at it like this. You know, anybody who does that is not well. So I look at it from that perspective. I'm not the type of person to sit here and say, um, Joel Rifkin is a piece of human garbage because he killed 17 women. I'm the type of person to say Joel Rifkin is an extremely unwell man because he killed 17 women, and sadly, he slipped through the cracks, and that needs to stop happening.
Hmm.
That needs to stop happening. When you look at how many times uh, Jeffrey Dahmer was in prison or jail, and you look at how many times, um, you know, he could have been helped. Um, but what happened? His family abandoned him and left him with an empty house. I mean, so do I think that all serial killers are just scum? No, I don't. I mean, that might not be a popular opinion, and I'm sure it's not, and I'm sure there's very few people who would agree with me, but um you know I think that if guys like Dahmer, um Richie Ramirez had gotten the help that they needed, instead of in Ramirez's case, he had head trauma. He had a mentor, his cousin, who was a murderer. He had a terrible drug addiction, mental health issues of every sort.
But
You
is
know.
that like, I have to have a little bit of pushback on that though, right? Because, right, for instance, there's mental health issues, right?
Hmm.
There's drug addiction. There's
Hmm.
being at the bottom of the bottom, and there's no way out. And you feel like you can't pick yourself up.
Hmm.
And then there's people who are serial killers, but they've lived an entitled life.
Yeah. Now
The the the, the
that's a different story. Like the Menendez brothers, they weren't serial killers. They killed their own family, and this guy Chris Watts, who I I find to be the most reprehensible piece of garbage on the face of the earth, killed his wife and daughters, just so he could be with another woman, you know, and this guy, he lived, the life of what they call the American dream. He had
Do you
this.
think Chris Watts, that was his first time he killed somebody? I don't. I think that guy killed before.
You could be right. I mean, he met his wife online, and anybody who does that, I'm suspect of. I'm very suspicious of. I think that he obviously um, could have, and it's likely that he, at least, if not killed, he certainly abused some other women. Um, because a person doesn't just do that out of the blue for their first time. Can't
To
say that either,
your
because
daughters, man, like to your
BTK.
daughters, like, it's like the
Yeah,
daughters. It's just like, even some serial killers had daughters that they would never harm.
right. I mean, that's
You
what I
know
was
what I
going to
mean?
say. With BTK, he worshipped his family. You know what I mean? That was, if there was anything more important to him than killing, it was his daughter, son, and wife.
Hmm.
And that was, you know, a lot of the kids, they go on and change their names. I mean, Bundy has a daughter. Nobody knows anything about her. Um, you
I
know,
actually
be,
tried to contact her 2 years ago. She's on Facebook. I know her name. I'm not going to release her name, but I found out who she was. And I added her as a friend to try to contact her, but it didn't materialize. And I thought to myself, maybe it was a bit of a piece of shit for doing that, because obviously that poor woman just wants to move on.
yeah,
She just wants to move on.
and
But
she never knew her dad.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
He was
yeah,
executed. And that in and of itself is another tragedy.
yeah. The ripple effect, as you say, because I want to talk about. I know we spoke about the victims there, but the really the heavy emphasis on the victims here, the ripple effect that has on the community with women. So he has this preference for working girls. The New York Ripper.
Mhm,
He kills them because he's a sexual sadist. He
mhm,
dismembers them. He scatters their body all over the city. He does
mhm.
that 17 times,
Yeah.
and he gets caught. Now, these girls, what type of an impact did that have in New York at the time amongst the working girls and just the girls in general?
Well, the thing is, they all recognized Joel's truck when he pulled up. They weren't afraid of him. They were
Right,
obviously
right.
they were like, Joel comes with money. He's a nice guy. He's not the best looking guy. He's at least somewhat clean. He's a regular old Joel.
Yeah, they're
So
they're they're going to get something from him. He's not dirty. He's maybe going to show up with it.
right,
He's a
right.
regular. He's a regular guy. Like,
And because the only ones that could say anything bad about him are dead, so everybody who's alive says good things about him. Yeah, Joel pays me. Joel treats me fine. He doesn't punch me in the face. He doesn't, set me on fire. He doesn't, but
because
then
just in general, people have to understand this. And just on a wee side note, Sean, take away the serial killing aspect. Some of these girls are getting into cars with guys that aren't killing them, but they're viciously beating them. They're giving them sexually transmitted diseases. They're not paying
yes,
them. They're raping them. They're doing terrible things regardless of the serial killing.
that's
So
the
so
victimology.
that's the victimology of this here. So whenever they see a guy coming up, Joel, who's actually a serial killer, and he's
Right.
coming up, he's clean shaven, he probably has a bit of aftershave on, he's got money, he's treating them
Yeah,
nice, he's maybe buying them pizza afterwards, and the
sure.
and then 17 times out of maybe the 200 times that he would visit these
I would
girls,
say I would say it was much higher than 200 times
thought,
that he
thought
just
1,000
a
times then.
thousand.
He,
Yeah.
I thought he killed, but he just didn't do it enough to put a red flag in the working girl community that it was him.
Right, because these girls disappear all the time. I mean, especially in New York City. They have guys wait. Well, not now. New York's a different place than it was then, but they used to have guys waiting at the Port Authority. They called them chicken hawks because they would look for girls and guys and say, "Hey, you need a place to stay? Where are you from? Iowa, Nebraska. Where are you? What are you coming in? What are you going to be? A singer, chorus girl, actor? What do you? I have a place for you to stay. Come on, And then
Hmm.
the next thing you know, he's pimping you out, and that was a common story, and I'm sure it still is, But nowadays, you have the um, these again, I don't know what terms I can say and I can't say, but you have these sex traffickers who actually kidnap girls and put them to work, or sell them into
Yeah, yeah. So,
sexual
and not only
slavery.
that, and you've got that side of things, the real evil side of things, but you've also got another avenue for working girls where you have OnlyFans, you have the internet era where these girls can be protected in their own
but
home, make millions.
but check
Just
this out.
you know.
All of Rex Heuermann's victims were from Craigslist.
So
you
he
know
basically is a new age Craigslist killer then.
yes, yes, right, right.
Wow,
you know
wow.
so is there a safe way to enter this field of, or this
Well, that's
profession?
the physical
I say
side though.
no.
I'm
I say
that's the physical, like the meeting up part that
right.
I'm
If
saying.
you want to do like the sex cam, look at me,
Yeah, yeah,
drop
yeah.
some money in my Venmo and I'll do a little, whatever you want, you tell me, that kind of stuff. And then you're talking about more on the fantasy level,
Yeah,
but there's an extremely dark side to that. If
yeah.
you go down the extreme, dark web part of that, and you're having these videos where a girl has been literally captured, tied up, and you're using cryptocurrency to say, "Hey, I'm going to take this blowtorch to this girl. Where should I do it? I'm going to put this cigarette out on her. Where should I do it?" You know,
Well, there was one red room found in Italy. Now I listen. I have to say this. I can't debunk red rooms, but I can't say they exist either. But what I will tell you is everything is off the dark web now. It's on apps like Telegram
sure.
and Discord because they're more encrypted than the dark web.
Yes.
So these
Look at
things do.
the guy, the one guy, they thought he was this, terrible. When they caught him, they thought he was going to be this terrible monster. He was this 22-year-old kid. He had a 64 character encryption on his hard drive. They finally broke it. And the terrible things that this 22-year-old kid was doing to children, raping an 18-month-old baby, and just doing things that no human could want to see, because how can you get it out of your mind after you see it?
That's the epitome of evil, though. That
That
even goes
that is that
because
is.
some serial
There's
killers.
no there is no redemption
There's no
for a
redemption because
child abuser, anybody, a pedophile is going to offend no matter what they say, no matter what they tell you when they get
yep,
caught, no matter how many chemical castrations or whatever you give them, they are not uh, capable of being rehabilitated.
of
You
course,
know,
100%, because because and people get at me whenever I say this because it's literally their sexuality. That's
it,
like me saying to you, Sean, don't
it's right.
ever look
It's
don't ever
in
look at
it's
beautiful.
in their DNA.
Yeah,
You
don't
know,
look at beautiful women, Sean. I'm
right,
not allowed to look at beautiful women.
right.
That's what they see. They cannot even fathom not doing that. So they're going to say anything to be able to get access to that. So in my opinion, you could the best thing is to chemically castrate them.
But that doesn't always work. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
but it would
Maybe they
help. I
can't
think.
penetrate,
Yeah,
but they can digitally penetrate these
yeah,
children.
yeah, 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 yeah.
They can make, force them to do things. I'm telling you, it's not the answer. The answer is just to lock them away and give them help psychologically. But like somebody who kills, I believe, can be rehabilitated. Somebody who, this is part of who they are, their their genealogy, their whole makeup is, I'm attracted to children.
Hmm.
You can't fix that. You can't fix that. You
Not
know,
even with no psychology, drugs. Maybe if you put them on like a drug that makes you a zombie for the rest of your life, but you may as well just kill them. Do you know what I mean?
I'm not saying that there's not the one exception to there's always an exception to every rule. And there probably is a guy out there who hated that he was that way so much that he either killed himself or he just does everything he can do to stay away from children.
I knew of a guy in my not in my area. He's about maybe about 20 miles away. He sawed off his own wanger because he had a dream of him doing something like that, and they found him on the beach, and he cut off his own wanger. And the finder says, "Why did you do that?" He says, "Because I had such a vivid dream that I was doing something bad that I had to stop myself, and I woke up and everything was off."
Wow. Hey,
Isn't that mental, isn't it? He couldn't even, but that once again, he wasn't a pedo. That was a vivid dream. I think the guy was suffering from schizophrenia too, a little bit.
yeah,
But
I would say
but
there's something else going
so
on there.
Joel is still alive in
Yeah,
prison.
yeah.
Has
Mhm.
is he remorseful for his crimes?
No, no, not at all.
Right,
Not at
right. So
all.
what's he saying in prison? What's the talk in
I mean,
prison?
he will, he'll do interviews and talk about his crimes and recount, um, you know, how things went down and things of that nature. But he doesn't have any remorse. He's not capable of it. He's not wired that way. Um he doesn't, see his victims as human. He sees them as, prey, and that's why he could do what he did. I mean, for a person to say, you know, I'm going to go out kill people, and I know that these are people, that takes a different kind of killer. Like Rex Uerman, you know, who is probably the most similar to Joel Rifkin, but he had this element to his dynamic where he knew he was hurting other people besides the victim. He knew he was hurting their families. That's why he would use those burner phones to call their families and say, guess what? When I killed your sister, and this is, you're going to be a whore and a hooker and a prostitute just like she was. And, I tortured her and I did all these terrible things to her. And he did that to, relive the event of killing the person, to cause more pain,
Mm-hmm.
because he is a textbook sexual sadist,
Mm-hmm.
far more than Joel Rifkin,
Mm-hmm.
and just like anything else, there are degrees to everything. There are degrees of depravity, degrees of mental illness. I always refer back to Richard Ramirez quote when he said, "Killing is killing, whether it's done for duty, profit, or fun. It's all the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're, doing it for when a colorful flag is unfurled before you and you feel so patriotic, you have to go, shoot some women and children in a third world nation, or whether you do it because you get sexually excited from it, or whether you do it because you're paid to do it. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's
Yeah,
all
I get
taking
what you're
a
saying.
life.
What determines, like, for instance, obviously what we're talking about here is there's people in society that have not got this predatory instinct, and they just live. They're not in a war torn country. They're not
Right.
living in, and they go out and they actively seek people to kill for their own gratification, whether that be sexual, emotional, whatever. It's sort of different going out, and you've got like a guy who's gun crazy. He's in the army. He goes out. He's in a third world country, and he just starts shooting and he starts killing a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's a different type of a gratification, but
Right.
where is the
But
line?
the
What
end
is the line?
result is the same. Is
The
is
end
what
result is the
what is
same. Yeah,
what Richard was getting at,
yeah.
and you know, it's not like the ends justify the means kind of thing, because if you are killing solely women, the most vulnerable women, these, sex workers, a lot of them are homeless, a lot of them are, doing this because they have little education, they need to survive, they need
Hmm.
to generate revenue, financially they're in a terrible position, and this is all they could do. They have children.
And yeah, that's what I was going to say. I just had to say that you took the words right out of my mouth. The pure ripple effect of this is a lot of these women that were murdered by these serial killers would have had children to provide for, hence why they were doing it. Some of
Right.
them. So the ripple effect is there is a child out there without a mother, and then that child could possibly go on to live a lifestyle that isn't as good as what they could have. And now they're put into
Sure, they're going to. There's no
yeah.
question.
Do
They're
you know what I mean? The ripple effect
yes,
is the victimology. The ripple effect is absolutely is mind blowing. People don't,
it
and
is.
and
It
I and I
is.
and I think on that alone, it's sad. Okay, the victim, it's sad because of the victim, but the victim's children, the victim's mother, the victim's father, the victim's auntie, uncle, granny, granddad, victim's friends. That
Yeah.
lives with them for the rest of their life.
Siblings. I mean, siblings, seem to take it um almost harder than the parents, especially sisters. One of them was out on the street, the other one wasn't for whatever reason, and the other one kind of was just waiting for the other sister to get her act together and come home, and then boom, she meets Joel Rifkin or Rex Hewerman or Richard Cottingham or any
Hmm.
number of these guys that focus solely on sex workers, and that is all they did. That's
And
you
it's, you know
know,
what, as a predator, I have to say it in a pure logical standpoint, I understand why they do it. But on a other pure logical standpoint, I have to say, as a predator, they went for the low hanging fruit. They
of
didn't
course
take,
they did. Of
and
course they did.
I
And
suppose,
it's been that way since Jack the Ripper. You
yeah,
know.
and but in a certain degree, though, it's like that's what it's like in the animal kingdom. You never see a lion
Right.
or
Right.
lions or cheetahs
They're
going
going to
for
go for the gazelle with the limp. They're not going to,
exactly, yeah,
and
exactly,
that's what they're doing. That's why the
yeah.
term "less dead" came into existence, because you know these women are already, you know
Emotionally vulnerable.
metaphorically dead. You know what I mean? There's
Yeah, well, they're emotionally vulnerable. People need to understand they're alive and kicking. They're brilliant. They're probably good crack to be around. I treat
sure.
everybody, but for pure vulnerability, they have the in society they have the broken leg because they're out in the street in the middle of the night where weirdos roam.
Right.
So they're
And let's face it, when you go to the police and say, um, I'm a sex worker, my
hmm
best friend is also a sex worker. She hasn't been back for 5 days. Okay, we'll take a report. That report is going in a box somewhere, maybe until 5 or 6 more come in, and then like, "Hey, wait a minute, we might have a serial killer here." You know? It's just that, society places value on people according to, you know, what they can do for society.
hmm
If you're a productive member of society and, you're the guy who hooks up cable TV, or you're the woman who sells um, iPhones, or you're the guy who cooks at the local restaurant. These are all people that are viewed with some value,
hmm
you know, but a sex worker yeah, they're viewed with some value, but it's a fleeting sort of value. Like,
hmm
if you're not here, another one is going to be. You know what I mean? Whereas, the guy who does your dry cleaning, well, he's a nice guy. He's a good bloke. I talked to him about, whatever, fishing or,
I
whatever.
get that. And how do you think the police? What do you think? Where's the responsible? How much responsibility relies on the local law enforcement in regards to this? Is it small? Is it big?
I
As
think
you
it's
said,
big.
they didn't really take that serious. They looked at these girls and they thought, well, look, it's not really worth looking into when there's other people going missing. So, do you think if the police and the precincts had a took it a lot more serious, that a lot of these girls could have been saved?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, I mean, you know, if you see something, you don't need to wait for the whole plot to play out before you can jump in and change it. You know what I
hmm
mean? Um, okay, let's say one girl goes missing, you get a report. If you ran that report down to its very last element, where did anybody see her? Who was the last person she was seen with? What kind of car did they have? What did they look like? But no, they it's like, okay,
Hmm.
we'll check into it when we get a chance, but right now we got a stolen bike over on Elm Street we have to check into.
Yeah, and that's the
You know
thing
what I
with it.
mean? They
I don't.
don't they
Yeah,
don't rate. They don't
it's
rate.
disgusting. It's 100% disgusting. And another thing, I want to end it in this here because I want to take a few questions. There's a few questions people have for
Okay.
you, but I want to end it in this here. People think that the serial killers in America, and just we're talking about America here,
Mhm.
people think that uh they're they're fantastic geniuses. Even though they're evil, they're
Right.
fantastic geniuses. No,
They're
a
all
lot,
Hannibal Lecter
a lot.
in
Yeah,
the
they're
uneducated.
not. They're not though, because half what I'm reading into, especially when it came to the Golden State Killer, was that it was cops unwilling to work with other
The
districts.
Golden State Killer was a cop.
He was a cop, but what I'm trying to say is other cops who didn't know him, districts wanted
Right.
to wanted
Because
they
look,
wanted
this
to catch him. They
they
wanted to catch him, so they didn't work with other cops because and afraid in the case that they caught him, so they didn't work. They didn't
right.
share information. All cops should share
You,
information for
you
the
have
protection of society.
nailed it right there. You nailed it right there. Look, these precincts is I mean that's what these areas are called in America. These every like so many miles has a precinct, and that's the jurisdiction that this police precinct is responsible for. Well, sharing information between precincts even didn't always go smoothly
Hmm.
because you know what? It's like a competition because these cops are mainly uh, like type A personalities where they're like, we're going to solve this crime. This happened in, but where they could say like, hey, we have a very similar crime happening in our area right now. What do
Hmm.
you know? And they're like, well, find out for yourself, like it's
Like if you were
I
a
don't
serial
understand
killer, you
that,
would just move from precinct to precinct, and knowing that the
Right,
cops are going to share
right.
information.
And then
And
when the FBI gets involved and they really get their panties tied in a knot because they're like, "Oh, wait a minute, these guys are all college graduates. They're forensics experts and profilers. Screw them. We're Johnny on the beat. We've been pounding shoe leather all day looking for this killer. We're not going to let these feds come in and steal our glory." And then you throw in corruption, and you're going down a whole other rabbit hole. There's so much corruption involved in the Gilgo case that uh, you know if that wasn't involved, Rex Heuermann would probably be 10 years into his sentence right now,
yeah, so listen, what we'll do now is, if you have time,
Sure.
what we'll do now is just take a few questions. So we've got a question from Maria. She says, Sean, do you think Brian Koberger is guilty? Has he done it before?
I've been following that case, and it's, I mean, the case against Kohlberger is, in my opinion, pretty weak. Um, they found DNA on a knife sheath that was found under one of the victims. Um, so it's not like a slam dunk case. They have a lot of um, circumstantial evidence against them. They don't have a lot of circumstantial evidence against them. They don't have a lot of forensic. They have one his blood on a knife sheath that was found at the crime scene. So I think Kohlberger, or he I don't know if he's guilty or not. I mean, he'll have his day in court, and maybe we'll hear about it. Right now, they're trying to decide whether or not they're going to allow um, the media in the courtroom. So whether or not we'll see um, the trial unfold and just what evidence they do present, or we'll have to hear about it on the local news, and then hear it second or third hand, the further away from the case you get, the further away from the courtroom, the more the story is spun. And so you don't know, how much this evidence that you're getting at this point is what was actually happening in the courtroom. I think, cameras should always be allowed in the courtroom. Um, in his case, if he did do this one, I definitely don't think it was his first. Um, there was a rumor that he was in touch with Dennis Rader, who is, everybody knows is the BTK killer, and but Dennis denied that. So, um, does he have an interest in serial killers? Right now that's just a rumor. So I would have to say I'm watching this case with everybody else, just because it's a tough one. I mean, the guy's a student. He doesn't appear to be um, in any of the serial killer boxes. So, and what he did, technically, he's not a serial killer. He was a mass murderer. He killed 4 people at once. Um, so,
It's like
you know,
sporadic, isn't it? It's sporadic that it's not like
yeah.
a it's not I get what you're saying. It's like serial killers. There's all these definitions from mass killers to serial killers, to mass shooters,
Well,
to
the
you know.
serial killer is, it used to be 3 victims with time in between, a cooling off period in between. Then they changed it to 2 victims with time in between. Now they're saying it can be 1 victim
No.
according to the methodology of the murder. No, in other words, if there are elements of serial crime involved with the first one, like a signature, did they tie a certain kind of knot? Did they strangle them a certain way? Did they hang them? Did they, cut off their hands? Did they, if
Hmm.
if that happens, a person can be, um, you know, thought of to be a potential serial killer, but for all intents and purposes, it has to be at least two
Yeah.
with um, some time in between the killings. You
Hmm.
know, in other words, if you kill somebody today and then tomorrow, kill your mailman when he shows up at your door, you're not really a serial killer. You're, a disturbed person who,
Yeah, I get what you're saying. But I totally understand that. It's actually the psychological aspect to it, because
right?
with a serial killer, there's a purpose to it, regardless if they're low intellect or high intellect. There's a purpose to there's a method to the madness.
Yes.
They do it for a reason, where you have a guy maybe has a mental breakdown, kills somebody one day, kills somebody the next day, kills somebody the day after that, even though they've
Right.
killed 3 people. it's
Right.
it's actually, there's no method in the madness. It's just they've done it because they've just lost their head. Where
Right.
actually with a serial killer, there's a little bit more deviance that goes into it. There's sexual sadism, there's psychological
Yeah.
aspects, there's torture, there's all different types of things that goes into it. So they're a
Right.
little bit more complex. Now, see, for next week, I was going to say to you, can I plug this now? Next week, can we read out some letters that you've received from the serial killers, and if so, could you tell the audience which letters that you'll be reading?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have, probably the most interesting ones would be from Haddon Clark. I talk to him every Thursday on the phone. So I can, as a matter of fact, I did ask him last week if he cared about me talking about him on the,
Hmm.
he's not concerned with any of that. So I could read something from him. Um, BTK's letters are really hard to understand and really hard. His handwriting is really hard, but I can try to read something from. I mean, I keep them in notebooks with, like, in these plastic sheets, so I could kind of just flip through them. very few of them talk about their crimes. I can tell you that ahead of time, but they do they do talk about crazy stuff. I mean, Haddon's letters are all over the place. He just he's not a well man. He, you know, I consider him a friend, and you know, I definitely care about his well-being, but he's in the right place right now. I mean, he's getting some psychological help, not as much as he should, but I personally believe that if he were released, he would be a danger to society still, even though he's 72 years old. He's in great shape. You know.
Yeah, and explain to the audience. So that actually, first off, I can say that's happening next week. So we'll have a subject matter next week on a serial killer, but Sean will also be reading out one letter from one of the serial killers that he
Yeah,
speaks to.
I'll dig through and find the good. I mean,
Yeah,
I, Todd Colehep is a good. I mean, his letters are always entertaining because he's always complaining about the conditions of the prison that he's in. Which
and you know what, and just for the audience, because a lot of the audience would have heard or said, look, Sean speaks to serial killers. Actually, he just said there that he's a friend. He would consider one of these serial killers a friend. Do you want to explain to the audience why you do that, and do you and and let them know that actually you don't have sympathy for this for the act that they've done?
no, not for the
Yes,
no. I
there's a
feel
lot of new people in today that probably wouldn't know the sort of backstory.
yeah. No, I don't condone or glorify what the actions of you know, killing children or killing women or killing anybody really. Um, you know, to quote Perry Farrell, you know, some people should die. That's just unconscious knowledge, but you know, it's not for us to decide as you know fellow members of society. Um, but you know, when you choose the most innocent and vulnerable as your victims, that's there's nothing to glorify about that. There's nothing to say these guys are heroes or these guys are you know superstars.
Hmm.
I my interest is as a person who also suffers from mental health issues and has a dual diagnosis. You know, I realize that um, you know, if I didn't get help when I did, yeah, who knows what could have happened, you know? I mean, there were people that I, you know, saw every day that I hated, you know, if I had caught them at the right moment and I was out of my mind off medication and you know anything could happen. You're just one bad decision away from throwing your whole life away and
Hmm.
you know thank whatever there is that you know I was able to put myself in psychiatric help and you know get over a lot of my feelings of rage and I would have loved to have seen Haddon be able to do that and maybe we wouldn't be friends right now but his victims would be alive and he would be living a much better life and the same goes for Jeffrey Dahmer and Richard Ramirez and Ted Bundy and you know the list goes on of guys that could have been, you know, that could have been tremendous contributors to society. And I'm not saying that every serial killer fits. Some of them belong in prison, and some of them should never get out.
Hmm.
But there are those that if they had gotten the help, uh, because they suffered egregious abuse, um, not to mention hereditary psychology, um,
Mental health issues that mental health issues that sort of progress on. Like, for instance, I had to quit smoking weed because I've got an underlying mental health condition that sort of started bringing out schizophrenia. I mean, I thought people were walking behind me. I thought that the world was watching me, so I just stopped smoking weed. And if I actually look into my family history, there, you know, my father would have probably a little bit of that in him. So it's like
yeah.
you could have something hereditary in you.
Yeah, my
Um,
dad was schizophrenic and a drug addict and an alcoholic, but he wasn't abusive to me. He was, he went to work every day, but on the weekends, he could get pretty crazy and get into some pretty serious brawls in the local pubs. He
he
was
must have been Irish, was he?
yes, my
Yeah,
whole family is.
yeah,
you know.
yeah, I could tell. But listen, another question. The last question. It's from Melissa. Why do serial killers spend years on death row?
Well, the reason is because once you receive a death sentence, a series of um, other trials go into a series. It's automatically contested. So you're automatically going to get looked at again to make sure you had the best uh, defense, that there was nothing hinky with your none of your rights were violated, all of the evidence was handled properly, um, and then you also go through the whole um, the whole circuit of courts until you run out, and then when last that last sort of hope runs out is the Supreme Court. After the Supreme Court ratifies the death warrant, then a date is set, and then you're executed. Um, Now, right now, there's a moratorium on the death sentence. So everyone on death row right now in most states in America are there indefinitely. And essentially, their sentences have been commuted to life in prison without the possibility of parole. So
Wow.
to say someone has been on death row for too long, they're probably going to be there a lot longer. And they're probably going to die on death row like Richard Ramirez did, um, you know, because of health issues. Um, a lot of these guys get caught, if you're talking about serial killers, get caught in their later years, 40s, 50s. So when you've done 20 years and you're 70, and living in prison is not like living in a hotel. You're not sleeping in a comfortable bed, you're not eating good food, you're not getting good health care. So your life expectancy is probably getting chopped exponentially. So a lot of these guys are going to die on death row, and I get it. That's not the justice or really revenge that the victims' families are looking for, but that's the facts that we have to deal with now. And I mean, state funded and carried out murder is no better than serial killing. You know, the death sentence.
I sort of agree with that because at this look, and this is why I agree with that. I think personally myself, I think anybody that has, if we've got conclusive evidence that somebody's a serial killer, I think if they're going to be on death row, and we know 100% no stone unturned, right?
that they're
and
guilty.
there's a consensus with everybody that this person's guilty. I think within the first month they should be put to death. That's my
Yes,
opinion.
yeah,
But
yeah. If you're gonna if you're going to do it, if you're going to use the death penalty, you do it like that. You you hand down a death warrant and you carry it out. You know, you go you sure you make sure that everything, all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, everything, the trial was fair, the jury wasn't tampered with, everything was as it should be, eyewitnesses, forensic evidence, circumstantial evidence, everything says this
mhm.
guy killed 20 people, and the death penalty is on the table,
Do it
then
within do it
then
within a month. And the reason why I'm against the death penalty is because right now in America, it's something like between 25 and 40% of the people on death row are actually innocent. They know
sure.
that. So
Right,
the
right,
death the,
especially in Florida. I mean,
the death
Florida and Texas are notorious for executing not only innocent people, mentally, uh, mentally,
ill people, low intellect
yeah,
people. Yeah,
people with um, different issues, people that are um, not aware of what they've done. They've been pushed through. Um,
coerced, maybe set up.
yeah, yes,
Set up,
and
maybe trained that way. Like I heard of one guy in Florida that he killed his mother, but actually he had very low intellect. I forget. I'll get the story of this here. I'll post it in the link after this is done. And he killed his mother, but she every command he knew was done with a bell. With a bell, so
wow,
he could kill a pig, he could kill a rooster, he could kill an animal. And what she didn't realize, she was training him to kill, and she got drunk one night and she started hitting the bell and he killed her because
wow.
he thought that that's what she wanted, and he got at her, and
That needs to be a movie. I
he
definitely
he loined her, he loined her, he done everything, and they put him on death row, and it was actually quite fast, funny enough, and he's not
oh,
with us
yeah,
anymore. And
that
I thought to myself, well, hold on, that wasn't that guy's fault. He's obviously got autism, he's obviously got low intellect, and he was just trained to do what he done. And actually, if anything, he should be totally exonerated and put
right,
into a mental facility.
mental, right,
You know,
right.
you know what I mean? But and
And
just
that's
on
what I advocate,
yeah,
I
100%, Sean. Yeah,
for most cases. I mean, if it's a rage killing, you know, I mean, there's something called a crime of passion where you can actually be exonerated. Like if you come home and find your wife in bed with another guy and you kill them, or at least one of them, you know, a crime of passion is an actual defense, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. I know that it's a defense over here too. There is such thing
Yeah.
as a crime of
Eh,
passion.
I
And you
mean,
know, and you know, I
I,
was going.
I, that's another gray area,
Like
because
I could say, well, I came home and Sean was stealing my money, or I came to Sean's house and I was stealing Sean's money, and you could say to the police, well, hold on, it was a crime of passion. He actually didn't mean it. I'm totally sorry. He was stealing my money, but actually,
right,
maybe I was stealing the money that you owed me, or maybe you were stealing the money that I owed
right.
you. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Just get away with it.
You never know the
Yeah,
full story until,
yeah,
you know,
100%. Yeah,
and the system of jurisprudence in America is not free of corruption. It's not um it's not the best system. It's the system that's in place, but innocent people are convicted every day.
mm-hmm.
And that's why, things like the Innocence Project and things like that need to be supported
What's your guy's
100%.
name? What is your guy's name? He's Lennox Lewis's ex lawyer who runs the Innocence Project now, doesn't he? He was on the JRE podcast, and he was the one who came out with the statistics
Uh-huh.
about about like 25% of people on death row are actually innocent. It's
Right.
actually down to police corruption, and it's not even a racial thing. There's white,
No.
black, Hispanic,
Right.
Chinese. It's a quota. It's a machine that needs fed, and they go out and they look for people to put on death row. And I never thought it was like that. But you know what, Shawn? Now I know it says that was the last question, but one last question for you, and this is it, and then we'll leave because I know you're busy and you have to head on. Has Shawn ever seen someone being put to death in prison?
No, no, I've never witnessed an execution. I've seen someone stabbed. I've seen lots of brutality. I've seen people, um, I mean, murdered, but not an execution. I've never seen anyone executed by the state. I would have no, unless I was, a family member or something like that. I would not have access to witness an execution. I saw somebody have their intestines ripped out with a homemade knife that was looked like it was made out of a rusty can lid. I've seen people hang themselves. I've seen a guy get a weight dropped on his head. Um, so I've seen lots of violence and brutality. Um, you know, I hadn't been involved in any of it, but it was right next to me, happening, and all you can do is walk away. You can't,
Hmm.
if you get involved, you know,
That's
shame on
it's
you,
it's going to be
because
your life at risk then,
right,
basically,
unless that's your best friend and you knew him from the street,
Yeah, I
it's
get you.
just somebody you met in prison.
I
And
get you.
that's how you have to look at it. You can't, you want to go home. That's the main thing. You were convicted alone. You were uh, brought to prison alone. You're going to get out alone. And that's how you have to look at it. So, yeah, I witnessed a lot of brutality. I've seen people get killed. Um, but, you know,
You've never witnessed an organized execution of
no,
maybe somebody on death
no.
row, but in some degree, though, that is
I mean, I would,
probably
the only
less.
way that would happen is if somebody killed somebody in my family, or something like that. They don't let inmates just, I've never even been at a prison when there was an execution, because Maryland's had a moratorium on the death penalty the whole time I was in prison, and still to this day. So, I was. I was in prison when um, the DC snipers were brought in. Um, that was Now that ended in an execution, but not in Maryland. That was uh, they had committed murders in other states, and I mean, John Malvo was executed. John Allen Muhammad was convicted and executed. Lee Boyd Malvo is still serving a life sentence because he was a minor during a lot of the shootings.
Hmm.
But that was the closest that I ever came to, like, and that was not even close at all to an execution.
Hmm.
Uh, so
Well, Matt, I was going to say that I'll end it in this note, that actually to witness an organized execution of somebody on death row is probably less traumatic than the actual things that you've witnessed
oh
in
yeah.
in your life. Do you know what I mean? Um,
Yes.
so people do, listen. What I'll do is I'll leave the link for Shawn's story I done last year. I'll leave the link for that in the comment section and description. Head over and watch that. He's got a fantastic story. The guy's lived the life. He's going to come on. We'll do separate parts away from this about Shawn's life. There's so many things we could speak about. But listen, that is the end of the podcast, Shawn. Um,
Okay.
I mean, thank you very much once again.
Yeah.
Your
It was a
wealth of
pleasure.
Yeah,
Pleasure
listen,
again.
pleasure is mine, Sean, to have you on to hear the knowledge that you have,
I
and we'll be
appreciated everyone's questions, and I hope I was able to answer them satisfactorily. I mean, I wish I had more information on statistics on the executions and more information on the Kohlberg case, but that's going on right now, so I'm following
well,
that
well,
right
what
with
what we'll do is
everybody.
we'll do next week. We'll be reading a letter from yourself. So
Mhm.
next Thursday at 9 p.m. Make sure you tune in for that, and we'll be talking about a specific killer. Maybe we'll talk about him. Maybe we'll talk about that case. I don't know which one we'll be talking about yet, but
Okay.
every Thursday or so, maybe the day might change here and there, but you can rely on every Thursday, roughly between Thursday and Sunday, there will be a live talking about a serial killer and talking about these types of topics. Listen, guys, you've been absolutely fantastic. Thank you to the live chat. Thanks to all the mods. Lucifer, I see you've came in. He's a good friend from a while back. Melissa, once again, thank you very much for joining. And everybody in the chat, Stevie boy, everybody, listen, the whole lot of you, you've been fantastic, fantastic questions. That is the end of the podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you, Sean, and peace out, guys. Peace.